So, good morning, everybody. As you can see, we're joined by Becki this morning, and I'll introduce her shortly. So, it's great to be with you this morning. It's great to be hosting our second event of the Basingstoke Deane Business Festival. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Warren Munson, founder of Evolve, and I'm really excited to be your host for this webinar. Firstly, some real thanks to Basingstoke Deane Borough Council, who are fully funding the festival to support the local Basingstoke Deane business economy. The funding provided from the festival forms part of the council's efforts really to support both businesses and business leaders, business owners, entrepreneurs, and support you through post-pandemic years, and obviously some uncertain times that perhaps we're approaching now as well, and they're there to support you. And I know that the economic development team would love to connect with you and speak to you as a result of you attending today. The overall kind of objective of the festival is to provide an exciting lineup of events, both in the real world and online like today's, to provide ideas, inspiration, motivation and connections. Now, there's plenty of events still to come, and we're going to be running some follow-on events also in the autumn. So if you want to attend some of the other events, see what's happening, connect with us so that we can give you details of those events in the autumn, then please do go to evolvemembers.com. So during the course of the festival, we also wanted a broad church of events, some covering very sort of development matters around growth and change management and providing that inspiration, but clearly, given everything that we've all gone through in recent years, that subject that at Evolve we hear time and time again is, well, how do we be more resilient? How do we build resilience? And therefore, I'm really, really pleased that we've got an expert speaker on the subject, and I'll introduce her properly in a moment in Becki. But for those of you that aren't familiar with Evolve, I should just tell you a little bit about Evolve. We are a community of business leaders and owners, and we know that leading and running a business or any organization is a unique journey. It has lots of joys and challenges, lots of highs and lows, and definitely isn't a linear journey. It's one that takes the shape and form of a roller coaster. Therefore, our aim is to provide you with the advice, guidance, and sometimes just that sounding board or sympathetic ear to anyone who's on that journey towards achieving meaningful success for themselves or their organizations. Now, we kind of do that through a variety of different ways, be it our weekly newsletter and articles, regular events such as this festival, and the Evolve to Succeed podcast, as well as some specific learning and development workshops, peer groups, and coaching programs. And we also bring all of that together through our leadership community, and more on that after Becki has spoken. But you're not here to hear from me, you're here to hear from Becki. So let's get this webinar properly underway by introducing our expert and presenter today, Becki Houlston. Becki is a therapist and a coach specializing in stress, anxiety, but also assists individuals to release those negative habits and beliefs. She's a wonderful woman. I've used Becki as a coach myself, so I really believe in what Becki says and does. She is passionate about her work and has helped in many different business communities throughout the UK. And an often heard of phrase when somebody has got their back to the wall is go see Becki. So Becki, an introduction for you there. Over to you. I'm going to give you control of the screen. And I know I will then turn my video off so I'm not a distraction for our participants. But yeah, I think you should have control now.
Right, let's just check this out. And for anyone who's also been using a lot of Zoom over the last couple of years, they'll understand sometimes technology doesn't go quite according to plan. No, I haven't got control at the moment.
Okay, if you click on it, it should work.
Now let's try again. Let's try clicking again.
Yay, there we are.
I'm in the room. Brilliant. Thank you very much, Warren, and thanks for that introduction. And hello, everybody.
And I'll see you at the end, Becki, to host the Q&A. So I should say that, sorry, I'll intervene. To anybody on the webinar, we'll do a short Q&A session at the end. So please use the Q&A or the chat function within Zoom to pose your questions as Becki speaks, and I'll come back and host the Q&A at the end. With that, great. I will disappear.
Thanks for that. And yeah, I will be really excited to take any questions you have at the end. I won't probably be, I'm not able to see the chat box at the moment during the seminar. So, hopefully any questions you got, I'm really interactive, really want to know your thoughts, and we can cover those as we go along. So thank you. So it's very rare for me in the UK to be competing against the sunshine, and especially on such a warm day. So thank you all of you that have tuned in and given me your time. I love doing this workshop, be it a workshop or a seminar, and I've been doing this over the last couple of years over lockdown, and it's been incredible to see the value that people have taken from it. And it's been, most of my work is one-on-one, so it's a great opportunity for me to go out to many more people. But before we get stuck in a little bit to my favorite subject, which is building resilience, just a little bit of housekeeping. So, I don't know about you, but we've all got into podcasts, we've all got into listening to stuff and sort of doing things at the same time. I'd say if you want to get the full value out of this workshop, it's going to be a bit more interactive. I am going to be asking you to think about things. I am going to perhaps be encouraging you to write some things down too. So where you can, would it be possible to old school grab a pen and paper, or however you like to take notes? Because if you really want to make the most of this time, that will be the best way of doing it. Okay, and to anyone who's just perhaps busy and listening in the same time, there will be perhaps some little gaps where other people are going to be encouraged to write some things. So please bear with me at that time. So the first thing I want you to just think about for a moment is, over the last weird 2 years, and I don't know about you, but somewhere I was talking to a friend yesterday, and in my head I was calibrating the last couple of years, and I was thinking, God, I'm actually missing a year that I can't account for. So I wonder, if you could just reflect for a moment now, how have you felt you have grown as a person over the last 2 years? How have you grown as a person over the last 2 years? And just see what thoughts come to you now. And it's very easy to look at how we've grown as a business for those of you who have got your own businesses. We always focus on our business growth, business growth, business growth. But when do we look at how we've grown over the last 2 years? So think now. Maybe you've grown in self-confidence. Maybe you've become more adaptable. Maybe you've let go of some things. Maybe you've learned to value some things more that you didn't value before. I know certainly for me, walking was something that has really become a big part of my life and my well-being, where perhaps, I might just go for a walk but now it's something I really make happen, and I don't feel as good when I don't get out walking. So, and if you're struggling with that, or it feels uncomfortable to look at yourself, I just want you to notice, okay, that's interesting. That feels a little bit uncomfortable, and try and stay with me on that. Because we never make the time to really look at ourselves in this way. For most of us, we'll spend more time booking a holiday than we ever will understanding ourselves. And that gives us some blind spots, because when we're faced with challenges in life, and that's the only way we know when we have resilience or how reliable our resilience is, because when we're faced with challenges, the only way really is to grow through those challenges. But very often we're so busy trying to survive, we don't stop to actually reflect on how we've actually grown as a person, do we? And I know some of you be nodding along to that now. And the other blind spot we have with resilience, what does it actually mean? I mean, it's a huge buzzword at the moment, loads of book titles, everyone's talking about resilience. But who do you think of when you think of someone who's resilient? Who springs to mind? Perhaps it's someone from history, perhaps it's someone from a TV show, maybe a superhero character. Maybe it's someone you know, or someone that you once worked for or work with now. Maybe it's someone you read about. So think now about who you think of when you think of a resilient person. And what attributes is it that they have? What is it about them? What is it about what they've done or achieved, or what qualities as a person that you see in them that makes you identify with them as being resilient? How many of you thought of a man? How many thought of a female? Right. And who thought of themselves? Probably like nobody. It rarely happens. And again, this is a blind spot to us understanding resilience, because we leave ourselves out of this story and we see other people as being resilient and we don't include ourselves. And for any of you in business, You know, remember those early days when when you got your first customer, how amazing that felt. And then think about where you are now. Do you celebrate that first customer in quite the same way? Look at the resilience and the growth that you've gone through if you're a business owner from your, those early days when we make it up as we go along. Yeah, we all do. Even if we sort of know what we're doing, there's always something we have to make up as we go along. And we learn from that and we gain confidence from that. So there are a few things before we sort of really look at what resilience means that cloud our ability to really know that we're resilient. And one of those things just having a little screen moment. And one of those things is being able to take a look at ourselves. And that's something that I've now spent the last 14, 15 years doing, is helping people to understand themselves better. So as Warren said, just a couple of minutes about me. I've been helping people now for 14, 15 years. I started off more as a coach, but as I understood the demands and the blocks that people had more and more, it took me into training more therapeutically and really starting to work with the nervous system. I also use computer systems. I put sensors on your body and measure your stress levels, etc. And having had the insight into thousands and thousands and thousands of hours of understanding people, a lot of my clients are entrepreneurs. It just became a natural marketplace for me. But I also work with, high performance sports people in the music industry, but also anybody who's really struggling with stress and anxiety, or the symptoms of stress and anxiety. And most of my work is one-to-one. I have an office in Bournemouth, but I also see people globally and always have done. And the problems come down to very similar core issues, but obviously how they affect us can be very complex. But I'm these days very much interested in helping those that will then go on to make more of a difference in the lives of others. And anyone who's interested more in looking at my work and how I work, obviously, please do visit my website, BeckiHoulston.com, which if you just pop that in or pop into Google, you'll find me and you can learn more about my work. So one of the most important things is to understand that we've been given some very funky beliefs about life. And one of the big beliefs that we've been given is that in order to be happy, that life must be problem-free, right? So we know we're in this trap because we'll say things like, I'll be happy when, or if I could just get here, I'd be happy, or if I could just do this, this could happen, I'll be happy. Now, in a short-term moment, that's okay. But if you're running that belief as your life strategy, it means that you're going to be up and down, and you're going to oscillate from a fear state into sort of feeling a bit better and then back into a fear state, because we start to put our value as a person on only when we're happy. And so what that means is when we're not happy, it must mean that there's something wrong with us, right? So think now, are you running this belief that in order to be happy, life must be problem-free? And what this does is it means it inhibits our ability to deal with challenges. We don't learn how to deal with challenges well. What we learn is how to try and cope with challenges. Because life is full of challenges. I've been knocking around the planet for a little while now, and nothing stays good or bad forever. But when you start to shift your mindset to a paradigm shift of understanding that the challenges are experiences of growth, even some of the really difficult, heartbreaking challenges, then you start to see them differently as they come. You see them more like waves, and then you check in with your abilities to ride those waves. So think now, are you running, or do you identify, or do you know someone that may be running that strategy? Because the other issue that we have in life is that we think that life works like this. And school gives us this belief system that there are only two positions to be in life, right? So we're either at the fingertips of success or we're at the elbow of failure, and there is no in between. It's all or nothing. And we can oscillate between these positions many times a day, you know, and so when you're under pressure or you've made a mistake, suddenly we're a failure. But we also measure ourselves a lot against other people. So, and we tend to put ourselves at the bottom of the measuring stick and other successful people at the top of the measuring stick, don't we? You know, it's not very often we're at the top measuring down, certainly not in all areas of our lives. So it may be that you feel a success in business, but you feel a failure in relationships. Or maybe your fear of lack drives you to constantly be chasing achievement because you're deeply afraid of what would happen if you didn't feel a success. And that can lead to a lot of stress as well. So think about, where in your life are you running this strategy that you're either a success or you're a failure? Because what that helps, it means you're only ever focusing on success. And if you're focusing on success even, you're going to be missing the real place to get to, which is fulfillment. And when you start to focus on fulfillment, life starts to change. Because when we pay attention to our well-being, our productivity and our energy goes up. But we tend to focus on money rather than well-being, right? So if we have money, we're a success, and if we don't have money, we're a failure. Instead of looking at our sense of fulfillment. And one of the other things that life tends to then take on board is that if we only learn through pain, if we only pay attention to life through pain, so how many people only give up something that's harming? They give up smoking, or they give up eating, or they start to take care of their health more because they have a wake-up call. And that's where the pain has gone. You need to wake up. And when life sees that we only pay attention through pain, it starts to give us our lessons in life through pain. And that then starts to make us feel like, oh, here's another problem. Why does it all happen to me? And for some people, that can put them in a very victim mentality, which again takes us away from understanding our own resilience. So what does resilience mean? Resilience really is our ability to bounce back from adversity. Some of the most resilient people are the ones that have faced the most adversity. It isn't the people that have had the happiest lives. It isn't the people that are happy all the time, because they're not running that belief. Their self-confidence and their inner knowing that they can deal with things that come their way comes from the fact that they have learned to grow through the challenges. So how do you bounce back from adversity? Because another block that we have in how we calibrate adversity is how we embrace change. That word, change. Now, some people are thinking, hey, Becki, I'm good with change. In fact, I really embrace change. But generally, that's the change that we've chosen. You know, we've changed our car, we've changed our job, but we've decided to change it. The kind of change that wigs us all out is the change that we feel is done to us. It's when our redundancy happens to us, or we have to make some changes in what's happening in our lives, and we have to learn to let go of the control sometimes that has made us feel safe. So how do you deal with change? How do you face up to that? And there's a great little experiment to find out how you deal with change. So for those of you that have got pen and paper in front of you, this is what I'd like you to do. So pick up your pen. So I'm right-handed, that's my dominant hand. So what I'd like you to do now is switch that hand, switch that, you can't switch your hands, can you? Switch your pen into your non-dominant hand. So for me, that's my left hand. And now what I'd like you to do is write your full name with your non-dominant hand. Right. I'll just give you a few more seconds to challenge yourself with that. Right? Who's just met their inner toddler? Yeah. And who sort of actually didn't even do that task because they thought, oh no, that's either a waste of time or I'm not going to be able to do that. You worked ahead of doing the task and just thought, no, I'm not going to do that. Well, this experiment is a direct mirror to how you deal with change. Do you avoid change? Who started to write their name and then got in a judgy place with themselves over it? Oh, my handwriting isn't very good. This isn't very good. Which of you then looked at your first attempt and then started to repeat it until your handwriting improved with the other hand? Right, smart. So how you undertook that experiment is a direct mirror to how you deal with change. Food for thought, isn't it? But the good news with resilience is, what is it? I mean, an organization isn't a business, an organization, a family isn't resilient unless the leaders are. And the leaders aren't resilient unless they have learned the skills in life to be resilient. What often people think of as resilience is actually what I would call denial and disassociation. And they're the get on with it brigade. Getting on with it in certain contexts is the right thing to do. But mostly when your advice in terms of resilience, when we're meeting a challenge, is to just get on with it, and that's all you give, that tends to be denial and disassociation, which isn't resilient. What that is burying the reality of how that situation is affecting you. And the trouble is, as human beings, much as we've really tried, you can't separate your emotions from your human. Emotions are everything. And the human spirit is relentless. You know, our core of our resilience comes from the human spirit. So if we're just getting on with it, we're not connecting to all our great resources, and in often, most cases, not recognizing our great resources, which are very much required when the spotlight of challenge is on us. And the problem is, we've also separated business from our emotions. And therefore, we've lost connection with our human spirit through fear. You know, it doesn't matter what industry you're in, most of us, our customers are buying an emotion. We either solve an emotional problem for them, or we give them a sense of safety about something. We take their problems away from them. That's why they buy from us. I mean, I do that very literally. But, you know, for all of you, so when we separate from our emotions, we want our customers to love us, but we're not loving ourselves. We're not caring about ourselves as businesses. We're not caring about ourselves as business owners. We're just sort of crawling across the finish line very often, and then trying to give more and more energy to our customers. So if you're to look again at who you calibrated and who you thought of as a resilient person, are they in fact just getting on with it? Or do they really have the ability of resilience? Because people who get on with it tend to learn from the experiences, and that's how their self-confidence and resources grow. Emotions are everything, even the negative ones, which we all try and avoid because we don't know what to do with them. You know, none of us went to school and learned how to deal with difficult emotions. But here's the good news. every single one of you was born of resilience, right? You began life as a single cell with no life force, no brain or consciousness. Now, I doubt anyone on this call has stayed that way. Does anyone actually remember those blissful days? No. And the probability of you being born is 1 in 400 billion. You began as life force, and that life force is made of resilience and a will to survive. Imagine if you could fully harness the power of that resilience, of your early journey of life, because it's still there within you. We just don't know how to bring it out. And most of us have stuck a whole load of post-it notes over the top of us that sort of dumb down our connection to those vital resources. Stories of resilience often begin with bad news, don't they? You know, a tragedy, a pain. And the real story is made up of what happens after. But what's missing a lot in our emotional education is how do we get through the pain? Because that is where the core understanding and key of resilience comes from. But we're so glad to get out of the pain point, we don't actually ever take time to look back and see what we learned from this. Most of us are actually operating in survival mode. Thriving is utopia, right? And again, for those of you who are now thinking that in order to thrive in life, our life must be problem-free, you're probably running that old belief system or that troublesome belief system that says in order to be happy, life must be problem-free. And you know you're in survival mode, either as a business or as a person, because you're robbing Peter to pay Paul. That's either with energy, time, money, resources. And if we could just get through this week, if we just get through this month, if we just get through this quarter, that is a survival mentality. Now, when you are directly under threat in that moment, we need to go into survival, right? You know, our minds are here to help us survive. Our mind isn't here to help us to be happy. That's the heart's job. So your mind only knows how to try and find safety in whatever way it knows. So if you're stuck in survival mode, that's when you're going to get this sort of roller coaster where it feels like, and what happens also for people who are stuck in survival mode is they start to fear when life seems to calm down again, right? And I have loads of clients that will come in like that, and it's almost like they have to create drama. And the reason they create drama is because stability doesn't feel safe. And very often that comes from childhood experiences as well. But resilience is really the gateway to thriving in life. And that's thriving in life, whatever you're facing. Two people can have the same big challenging problem, especially when it comes to health, right? You know, if you think about health, two people could be facing a similar challenge, and yet they can deal with it completely differently. And neither's right and neither's wrong. And just make sure you haven't then brought out that measuring stick that says, you know, this person is successful and this person is a failure, because you're missing a deeper look at an understanding of somebody if that's what you're seeing. So think about where you are. But there's more to thriving and resilience than just thoughts. Very quick science immersive. Our nervous system is reacting to every single thing that we're sensing, thinking, and feeling. And very simply put, there are two sides to our nervous system. One is the accelerator and one is the brake. The accelerator is called your sympathetic nervous system, and the brake is your parasympathetic nervous system. There won't be an exam after this, don't worry. So ideally, we need to be working with an accelerator and a bit of brake, and an accelerator and a bit of brake, just like when we drive our cars. And I know some of you probably accelerate hard everywhere you go and then smack on the brake. And that's probably what you're doing in life too. And some of you are a lot more cautious on the brake. I was following someone on the motorway the other day, and they were driving in the fast lane, driving on their brakes. So every time, instead of just sort of going with the flow and the alignment of traffic, you know the people I'm talking about, we've all seen them, and they just keep braking instead of just going with the flow. And obviously driving behind someone who keeps braking puts you on alert too. So too much accelerator, or indeed if your accelerator is stuck on, and you'll know that because you'll just go, 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 and collapse with exhaustion. And probably not wake up feeling refreshed. And that means that your accelerator has been stuck on. Also, if your brake, and from a mental health perspective, that's more anxiety, that's more, manic, unable to switch off, overthinking, some of these symptoms are very real that come from having our biological nervous system stuck on go. And in the same way, the more sort of depression and collapse states and overprotectiveness comes from the brake. So if these two are out of balance, it's going to change your behavior. And through the middle of you, you have a very clever primitive nerve system called the vagus nerve. And that runs all the way through your body. And that sort of is supposed to keep check on these two nervous systems. But sometimes through immense stress and challenges that we haven't been able to deal with, or very often the getting on with it brigade are suffering more with the dysfunctional vagus nerve. And so that means that physiologically our bodies and our nervous systems are not able to just get on with it. And then we judge ourselves a failure. And then we start being hard on ourselves. Does that help us be resourceful and resilient? No. So resilience really means we need to take a more honest look at ourselves, which again, super uncomfortable, right? Really uncomfortable to take a proper look at ourselves because we're afraid of what we're going to see. Instantly, we think we're going to find a negative viewpoint on ourselves. But that is never the truth of us. That's just where we stop. So think now about some of the symptoms that might be coming up for you. There's also, again, this is more information about how we're then able to show up and be resilient in the true sense of the word. Is how does our nervous system deal with stress and pressure? Because there's a big difference. We all talk about stress, especially people, high achieving people. Stress has almost become a badge of honor and a badge of merit. The more stressed I express myself to be, the more important and the bigger the demands are on me. But stress and pressure are actually measured very differently by your body. And here's how you know the difference. When you're under pressure, it means that you can be resourceful. Pressure is short term, right? You're not under pressure for months and months and months. Pressure means you are accelerating into the challenge and then resting with the brake. Accelerating into the challenge and resting with the brake. You're able to be resourceful. Like, we can have our great ideas. And quite often people who have identified that they work better under pressure can often create a lot of problems for themselves trying to replicate pressure. So leaving deadlines to the last minute is an example of that. Almost trying to trick yourself into a pressured state, which is just not an effective way of doing it. There are better ways to increase your adrenaline for motivation and healthier ways. And the problem is, if you're using that strategy and then you get a lot of challenges, very quickly it's going to turn into stress. And stress physiologically is not a resourceful state. Stress is never positive and never a good thing. And lots of people who say they're not stressed is because they're not feeling stressed, but they'll have eczema down their arms, they'll be on blood pressure tablets, they're not sleeping, they're not eating properly, because you're all of eating, sleeping, all is to do with this vagus nerve. So if it's dysfunctional, it's going to really impact everything that you do and the quality of your relationship. So stress, one of the first things that happens when we're really stressed is a part of our brain at the front, our prefrontal cortex, closes down. And one of its functions, non-essential from a life or death situation, is our ability to spot errors and very elements of our personality as well. Which is why, you know, when we're stressed and then we make a load of mistakes, which then cause us more problems and more stress, that is a sign that your prefrontal cortex has closed down through stress. So, you know, and if you're someone that's learned to cut off your feelings to get on with it, which remember is not resilience, then you're probably way more stressed than you realize. And that's going to have implications on your health and, you know, as you go down. And also your style of leadership too. It will affect your style of leadership. So think now about which areas of your life are impacted by pressure and which are stressed. And where possible, try to change your culture in your businesses to talk about pressure rather than stress. And therefore use stress when you mean stress. You know, we're lacking a lot of emotional language to let people know how we're feeling, right? So this is all very well and good, Becki, but what do I do about it? So I'm going to give you 2 great little techniques to help you flip those. Try and, if your brake and accelerator system is out of balance, I'm going to give you 2 techniques which help you to turn them more functional again, which will then help how you feel, how you behave, how you sleep, how you eat, and your ability to be in the present. Everyone up for those, right? So obviously, if you're currently driving a car, one of them isn't going to be appropriate, but the other one is. So, you know, you're all adults, so please take responsibility for the space you're in at the moment. And also people around you, it's fine, there's nothing that's going to look particularly peculiar, just to let you know. So the first thing that we need to do is reset this vagus nerve that goes through the middle of your body. So this is what I'd like you to do. Now I've got my glasses on, so I hope you can see. So what I want you to do is look straight ahead, keep your head still, okay? And then I want you to take your eyes and I want you to look hard to the right, not up in the corner, just straight along on the right. And then just keep holding your eyes there until so for me, my body does a little yawn. Some might do a little sigh, or you just feel a slight shift in a feeling inside. But for me, my body will do a yawn, which will probably continue a bit in a minute. This is not a great one to demo on a webinar, but it's such an effective technique. I wanted to share it with you. So you've just looked hard right until you've done a little sigh or a yawn, or you feel a sense something just changes and lets go. And then I want you to put your eyes over hard to the left and just keep them there. And I know it's a bit tricky. You can blink, it's okay, but just keep your eyes there. See that little yawn that I just did? There you go. I can't stop it because that's my vagus nerve resetting. Right. And then it might just bring your focus back to the front, and then it just might make you feel a little bit dizzy just for a second. And then it should settle down. Okay, anyone else have that experience? Right, and now that's me now, reset. It's good, right? Really interesting. Now you can teach that, your kids can use it. It's very safe to use. And some of you now might have just started to feel a little bit tired, or like you've just come down a little bit from the place that you were in. Some of you might just feel a little bit more relaxed in your chest or your stomach. Good, right? The second technique I want to give you is a breathing technique. Again, this is really good for resetting your whole system and bringing you back into being in a relaxed, calm state. And again, we can be in a relaxed and calm state, even if we're in the middle of challenge. It's a mistake to sort of helicopter arm our way and fly, you know, in the wrong state. If we approach a challenge in the wrong state, it's going to take us over. But if we just step back when we meet a challenge and look at going into it in the best emotional state that we can, you know, you can still create calm and then go into the challenge. This is about learning ways to do this. And here's a great way too. It's a very simple breathing technique. And I think for a lot of people, they just sort of don't really understand how the vagus nerve and the accelerator and brake work. So they think that, how can a breathing technique help me when I'm perhaps facing a cancer diagnosis, or, you know, or I'm really financially stressed and I don't know how I'm going to pay my staff? How is a breathing technique going to help me, Becki? Well, how it helps you is by getting your system to calm down so that it's not feeling under threat. And when we're not feeling under threat, we're able to use our resources and our resilience. So this is why it's really important. So this breathing technique, it's easiest if, and we're just going to demonstrate, I'm going to demonstrate with you, we're going to do this, I think we'll go 3 times. Okay, so I want you to breathe in for the count of, you're going to breathe in for the count of 4, and then out for the count of 8. So breathe in through your nose, count of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then out for 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Breathe in for the count of 4, and out for the count of 8. Breathe in through the count of 4, and out for the count of 8. Okay, I don't know about you, but I'm just starting to feel a little, especially after the one before, a little bit woozier, which is good. That means that your nervous system is just starting to accept that calm. Good, right? Now, for some of you, you might have struggled on either the in-breath or the out-breath. If you struggled on the out-breath, it means you have difficulty letting go in general. So just start to sort of sit and focus more on your breath and work with it. For some that have the trouble on the in-breath, you'll also have some blocks in sort of letting things in, compliments, life, energy. It's quite telling. And if you struggled with the count of 4 and the count of 8, try the count of 3 and then the count of 6. So you just double the out breath, or increase it if that feels more comfortable. But that's my gift to you today. And you can use those every day, I would say. They're really, I mean, breathing is a good thing to do all the time, right? But we don't consciously breathe. We don't breathe as medicine. So these are good ways of setting yourself up to be resilient for the day. Because when we start full up, we can take on more challenges, right? If we start empty, then we start to give away our life force. And then that becomes, you know, dangerous to all of our systems. So, you know, please, you know, teach that to your staff as well. They're really, really good techniques. So let's take a deeper look at yourselves personally now. So I want you now to calibrate how resilient you feel you are in your life. If 10 was high and 0 was low, where would you put yourself? How resilient are you in your life? And how resilient are you in your business or your work? If 10 was high and 0 was low. And just be mindful, you know, if you're scoring yourself on what you feel is lower side, just be careful that you don't then get into a judgy place with yourself. You know, that inner critic starts, oh, you're not good enough. You know, all of that narrative. So just watch for that. And if that comes in, I'm going to give you a technique and a mode to help get rid of it. So now you've given yourself that score, we're going to have a little bit more of a look into what creates resilience. So I'd say thousands of hours of looking into people's lives. And I've always been obsessed by what makes people different. I would say that these are probably some of the top pillars of what creates resilience. So first of all, I think, and again, think of the person that you've identified as being resilient, but also please think of yourself, because you are also resilient, remember? You were built from resilience. It's to be purpose and passion led. I think when we have purpose and when we love what we do, it helps us get through the tough bits that it takes to get anywhere. There's no such thing as an overnight success, is there? But, I know certainly in my life, my purpose to help people, my purpose to make a difference in the world is what's got me through 9 cancer diagnoses. The fact that there was something bigger for me to focus on. It still needed to be healthy, which at times maybe I hid behind it, but it still needed, that purpose, that drive to make a difference for me in the world, certainly got me and gave me resilience to play a bigger game at times when I was terrified, understandably. But that's because I was lucky enough to have found what it is that I love to do. So think about your businesses or where you put outside of work. Sometimes when we love our work, it's very easy to become solely focused on our work to detriment of our relationships and our family and our health. And, we oscillate between working really hard and going to the pub, potentially. So think about your passion. Are you really bringing your passion into work, or are you a bit burnt out, in fact? I work with lots of business leaders who I help them to fall back in love with their businesses again. Because like any long relationship, it takes nurturing, right? And sometimes we can, in the minutiae and the dirge of running a business, you can forget what it was all about. You can forget those moments of the look on the customer's face, that first time that you really delivered what you'd wanted to do. So score yourself now on purpose and passion. 10 being I have clarity on my purpose, 0 not at all. And for anyone struggling with that, there's a great book called Finding Your Why by Simon Sinek. And he also does a great, he's got a podcast and he's got some great YouTube, good old YouTube, eh? Where would we be without YouTube? He's got some great videos as well. Because sometimes it's very hard to look at why we're doing something and without some help. So score yourself there. Determination. How determined are you to get there? Do you want it enough? 10 being high, 0 being low. And very often, particularly with a more entrepreneurial minded person, sometimes a lot of the determination that they have comes from pain. It comes from pain of proving that they're good enough. The determination is where they've taken childhood hurts often, and they're trying to channel that pain into being determined to be a success. But it does take a big degree of determination, to get through our challenges, which is, again, where the resilience kicks in. High emotional intelligence is also a really important pillar. So score yourself now on emotional intelligence, 10 being high, 0 being low. And what emotional intelligence means is it's your ability to understand others. It's your ability, compassion, which is understanding where others people are at, and empathy. And empathy is the ability to put yourself in another person's shoes. It's a big part of my work, is my ability to put myself in another person's shoes. And I believe a big element of my emotional intelligence came from adversity. And that is in my late teens, early 20s, I had an accident and I lost the ability to talk for 3 years. I spent 2 years in total silence and another year with a very iffy voice that would come in and kick out. So it was very isolating not being able to communicate. So I would be with all my friends, trying to live a normal life, but just not engaging vocally in anything. So I became like the nodder, and the no and the yes person. But actually, I find a purpose in that. And the purpose was, I started to see that in every thought that someone has shows somewhere in their body. And for me, my empathy skills came from those years of just watching people having communications with no need for my ego to get involved in those conversations, and to be able to feel what people were feeling, and instead. So emotional intelligence, or horrifically as they've been called in the past, soft skills, are actually the pillars of resilience. And if we've only just learned to get on with it, what we won't have done is develop some of those emotional intelligence skills. And they really are, I believe, the skills of the future. And you know, and also create our ability to be adaptable, you know, to deal with change. So the other point is trusting your instincts. So where are you on trusting your instincts? 10, I totally trust my instincts. 0, not at all. Do you even listen to your instincts? And if you're listening and trusting your instincts, do you always take action on your instincts? We've all had those times where we're like, oh, I knew I should have done that, or I knew I shouldn't have done that. I knew I should have called that person. I knew I should have checked the small print. Instincts are everything. And it's really difficult when you do trust your instincts and other people or other communities or other organizations start to tell you you're wrong about your instincts. We see this very often with some doctors, right? We just get an instinct that something's not right, which, okay, is a difficult thing for a doctor to navigate. But they don't know that we totally trust our instincts. I've written a book, which is in the sort of streamline for publishing at the moment, and it's about how at the core of how our well-being is our relationship with feeling safe in the world and feeling safe with people. And obviously this has been magnified in recent times. And to look at how, I wanted to understand more about how as humans we can thrive while under threat. So I went to some experts. I went and spoke to members of the Special Forces, firefighters, and extreme wave riders in Hawaii. Crazy people who get towed out in jet skis into, I think there's one amazing wave called Jaws. Yeah, you wouldn't go in that unless you didn't know, unless you knew what you were doing. And I wanted to pick some tips from them. Anyway, the guys from the Special Forces told me an incredible story. They were in the desert of Afghanistan a few years back, and they were on a mission in the night to go and repatriate a fallen comrade, very sadly. And they were all working together. And these, you know, get on with it chaps who have learned to compartmentalize their emotions in order to be able to do well in their work in some contexts. Anyway, they all agreed that something didn't feel right. So there they are in the desert in the pitch of night. Something just didn't feel right. And they've learned to trust each other. I mean, their ability to survive, everything is built on that trust and support from each other. So all feeling that something didn't feel right, they called in for air cover. And the RAF came in fast jets with thermal imaging cameras, and they scanned the desert out in front of the guys. And they reported back that all was clear. So the evidence from millions and millions of pounds worth of technology came in from the sky, and it was said that there's nothing out there, chaps. Did that evidence appease the lads? No, it didn't. In fact, it made them feel even more uneasy. Now, as it happens, the weather took a turn for the worse, and the lads were turned off that, pulled out of that mission. The next day, they returned on the same track. And further on than where they'd got to the night before, that's when they discovered the dugouts. The Taliban had been buried under the desert, and they were about to walk into an ambush. How did their gut instincts know that? Now, their gut instinct didn't say, right, Steve, yeah, Taliban, they're all under the desert. You might not want to go that way. No, it didn't. And this is the thing with gut instincts. It doesn't give us all the information. It just tells us this feels right or this feels wrong. So we need to start looking and trusting our big yeses and our big no's. And that's easy with the smaller stuff. But sometimes with the big decisions, it's a little tricky, right? And some of you may have like hired people that your instincts felt were right, only to find that person has let you down. And it may be that an initial instinct was missed, but your instincts are always right, always right. But sometimes our fears can contaminate our ability to trust our instincts. And so we start to mistake our fears for our instincts. Many people who have high levels of anxiety have this problem. They don't trust their instincts because fear has sort of contaminated those instincts. So just give yourself a score on those trusting of your own instincts. The other thing we need to be clear of, the other pillar, is clear on our strengths and weaknesses, but more so our strengths. This is the most uncomfortable thing for British people to do, right? I find this with my clients. It doesn't matter who they are, what they've achieved, what they're dealing with. Everybody inherently has this immense issue being clear about what their strengths are. And even if they're clear about it, they'll apologize for it, or, you know, they're ashamed to admit their strengths. What a shame. So are you clear on what your strengths are? You know, I often give my clients, let's write down some strengths. And the look on their face of panic. And then they'll scribble down 3 or 4. Yeah, there you go. They're my strengths. Whoa, you've been on a planet for this many years and that's your strengths. And yet if I asked them to pull out somebody else's strengths, they'd be like writing away a novel, often. So think now, are you clear about your strengths? Is it uncomfortable for you to look at what you're good at? Because if there is, there's a block there. And when we hit challenges in life, we need to know what our strengths are. Which brings us on to asking for help. How good are you at asking for help? And I don't mean like, okay, I am now on my knees. I now need help. I mean, that's so used to be me. What I mean by having a culture of asking for help, it creates collaboration. It creates trust. It creates connection, is asking for help. So how good are you at asking for help? 10 being high, 0 being low. And some of you are sitting there going, but there's no one to help me. Chances are you've created that environment because you never asked for help, and therefore you never engage with the helpers that are around you. And that becomes isolated. How's your self-belief and supportive self-talk? How well do you believe in yourself? 10 being high, 0 being low. Score yourself now. Again, a lot of people mistake self-belief for arrogance. I see the most brilliant people unable to articulate even to themselves what they're good at, and yet they're trying to play a massive game in life. You've got to lead with your strengths. And you need to be able to reassure yourself. And you need to be able to believe in yourself. Sure, self-belief needs to be backed up with some feedback from, from life, from trusted people. We do need some evidence of that. But, we're so desperately afraid of being perceived as arrogant that we can't, and we're not clear on our strengths. So we're all sort of a bit fuddling around in the dark. Arrogance is the absence of self-belief. When somebody's being arrogant, what they're saying is, I'm going to make a lot of noise because I need you to validate me because I cannot. That's a lack of self-belief. Self-belief is a lot quieter about how it gets its validation, but it is an internal feeling and an internal strength. if you think about your businesses as well, how strong is your self-belief within your business? Right? And some of you have just pulled up the success or failure graph in your head and judged yourself somewhere there. But then that brings us on to effective communication. How good are you at communicating? So we're clear on our strengths. I'm trusting my instincts. I've got good emotional intelligence, but I'm afraid of confrontation. So I'm afraid of having the conversations that are really important and that matter. So think now about effective communication, 10 being high, 0 being low. And here's a little giveaway. The mind doesn't understand the word don't. So very often we think we're communicating effectively, but it transpires we're not. So this is what the mind does with the word don't. It erases it. So for example, when we go to say to somebody in a well-meaning way, don't worry, what are we actually saying? We're saying worry. And lots of us, without even realizing it, are always communicating what we don't want. I don't want to fail. I don't want that to happen. And we don't even realize we're doing it. So think about where you're using the word don't currently. You know, your messaging, your emails, your text messages, and maybe you're not so much at work, but maybe when you get home, you know, lots of people communicate very well at work because there are consequences if they don't. You don't get paid. But we go home and all of it goes out the window. You know, we don't communicate what's important to us. And effective communication is a really good way of putting boundaries down. And again, those boundaries protect our energy, and those boundaries mean that we're able to have more energy for resilience, for taking on frontiers, for being more directive as a person and as a business. Right, food for thought. You know, I mean, so many talented people who are mute about their talents. And even for me, you know, I love doing this workshop, but one of the most uncomfortable parts is the bit where I talk about myself. And I'm still trying to get better at that. Which brings us into ineffective behavior. So these are some of the things that get in the way of us having resilience, on top of some of the things that, you know, I've brought and highlighted throughout this talk. Anger. Now, this is always a controversial one, because it isn't that anger is bad. We should never demonize anger. Anger is an important alarm system. But if we are not taking responsibility for our anger, then it becomes a problem. Anger becomes a permission slip. For lots of people who are afraid of confrontation, they wait till they're really angry, and then they're able to verbal diarrhea everything that is annoying them in that one go. And then they feel remorseful after. Know anyone like that? But also, anger tells us that a boundary has been violated. Now, it doesn't mean we're right, because very often in that moment when someone is angry, when they're not reacting to what's going on here and now, they're not reacting to the fact that you took their sandwich out the fridge. What they're reacting to is a time in the past where they didn't feel they mattered. If it's a here and now moment, and anger tells you that there's something that you need to communicate. A boundary has been violated. But for some people who are angry a lot, you can use anger to numb harder feelings. So loss and grief, for example, are really, really tough feelings and energies to navigate, to be able to feel, particularly if you've been a stuff it down and get on with it sort of person, or you have been raised with beliefs like you can't cry and emotions are weakness. Then anger, you're only left with anger. Hey, what emotion can you show? Well, you can't show that because you've been shamed into that. You can't show that one, but you can show anger. That's acceptable. And so very often people use anger to prevent them from feeling lost, because we can't be angry and feel lost at the same time. It's impossible. Think about it. So how does anger feature in your life? 10, it features a lot, Becki, or 0, not at all. Or maybe you control yourself through the day at work, but you get home and the smallest thing makes you like lose it, right? And you go from nothing to rage in a split second, okay? That's a red flag for you and not healthy. Blame. How are you at blaming yourself? You know, most people blame themselves for lots of things that really isn't their responsibility. You know, the more in control, the more we rely on being in control, the more we also blame ourselves when things are out of our control, even ridiculous things. You know, ever found yourself blaming yourself for the weather or why you've got caught out in the rain? I should have known better. Really? And that blame comes from sort of misunderstanding how we should learn. When we're young, we learn through making mistakes, and then we learn not to do it differently. But if we're stuck in blame, or we're continuously blaming others, then we're not taking any responsibility for ourselves, and we're missing the growth that is in this, whatever situation is presenting itself. Okay. Over controlling. Yeah, calling control freaks. Who likes to be in control? Right? No one likes to go out of control. Not really. But if you're too controlled, either of yourself or of other people, you know, anxiety is a symptom of that. Worry is a symptom of over controlling. It means you're trying to travel out into the future and control every possibility that might or could happen. It means you have a control problem. And you only have a control problem if you feel inherently unsafe. Right? If you feel safe, you don't need to control everything because you trust yourself and you trust your resources. And very often over controlling leads to overthinking. So we ruminate on a problem. We have the conversation over and over and over again, or we run the same narrative round and round as if we could change the past. And very often, if you're overthinking, what it means is that you are not in your heart. It means you are in your head. And what that also means is there's probably some deeper feelings that are difficult for you to manage. So you're staying in the safety of my head, but I just have to overthink. I'm trying to think a problem that is a feelings-based problem. Okay? And it's sort of like using the wrong department. It's like trying to fix your car in a sales department. They might know a bit about it, but they're probably not able to, they haven't got the right equipment and they're not able to get under the bonnet. The other part is avoidance and denial. Like you know, that's my go-to place. If something's too difficult, avoid it. And in a split-second moment, sometimes that's useful. But if you're avoiding too much, all the paperwork builds up, all the envelopes you haven't opened build up, all the emails build up, all the accounts build up, it starts to cause you stress. And also at the core of many addictions, obviously, is trauma and emotional pain. But the mechanism that keeps someone hurting themselves is avoidance and their ability to be in denial. Like they're so cut off from themselves that they're not actually even able to feel the harm that they're doing to themselves a lot of the time. So denial will also, you know, I only have to look at some of my clients' desk and it will tell me everything that's going on in their heads. You know, they're sat there with mess all around the place. You know, they're generally in denial about something, even if it's what we call organized mess, yeah. So where do you use avoidance? 10 being high, 0 being low. Self-doubt. That's when you start doubting yourself. And very often self-doubt comes from the bullying voice in our head, doesn't it? Telling us we're not good enough, telling us that won't work, telling us we won't deserve something, telling us something will fail. Have you ever checked the credentials of that voice? Probably never run a business. probably never done your job, probably never been a parent, can't even drive a car. And yet you're giving this voice governance over your life. The most empowering thing you can say to yourself when that voice kicks off is you say back to that voice, I approve of myself. And if it comes back with some gob, you say again, I approve of myself. And you keep repeating it and you'll find, remarkably, that voice would back off and disappear. Try it. Asking for help, we kind of covered that one. Asking for help demonstrates, it's the essence of resilience. So how are you asking for help? 10 being high, 0 being low. And finally, isolating. Do you isolate yourself when you are in a challenge? Something to look at too, 10 being high, 0 being low. So you should have given yourself some scores. And again, make sure that you haven't gotten into a negative narrative with yourself about that. Because this isolation is a big problem. And, obviously we've all experienced degrees of this over the last couple of years, but group animals are more successful at surviving. In fact, I love that first penguin. I mean, I really want to know what he's thinking. But group animals are more successful at surviving. But a lot of us have problems navigating with groups because psychologically, in order to survive, there's a primitive thing that happens when we get in a group. And automatically we start sorting for an in-group and an out-group. Who's thinking school all of a sudden? But there's always an in-group and there's always an out-group, and these can oscillate all the time. And they're natural parts of selection. And sometimes when we're in what we feel is the out-group, we're probably in another in-group somewhere. But it can be very painful sometimes to measure ourselves when we feel we're in the out-group and someone else is in the in-group, and it can give lots of people anxiety. So look now at how you structure your work and how those in-groups and out-groups work in your businesses and your families, because these are that collaborative approach is also the fundamental part of resilience. And we've adapted over thousands of years to work amongst others and to love amongst others. And some animals have done this incredibly. For example, dogs, when they became domesticated, in order to be loved and accepted and looked after by humans, over time they've evolved to develop muscles above their eyes, right? Now we think of these as their eyebrows. They're actually not, it's a muscle, right? So a dog, to create a connection with man, has created a whole new muscle set above his forehead, right? And that is to be in the in-group, so the dog can survive. Now, of course, there are other animals that didn't really need that, like this one. This one doesn't need you to survive. So this one hasn't bothered to evolve itself with the eyebrows to be fed and looked after. I wonder who's smarter. So think now, how do you deal with challenges? In your life, how do you deal with challenge? Because there are a couple of different ways which, as humans, we deal with challenge. The first one is we tend to disassociate from the problem, become the fixer, instantly become a fixer, and start to come up with solutions. Those people are always saying, what you need to do is. And they'll generally come up with some really helpful, resourceful ideas. Obviously, if they're coming up with resources because they've been in exactly the same situation, then that's more mentoring. But very often, even if they don't know anything about the subject, they're straight away will come up with resources and fixes. But very often, they're not necessarily clear about what the problem is. Especially in corporate, you get lots of fixes, but they're a little disconnected from the core problem. So everyone gets busy on their fixes that seem like a good idea, but the person on the shop floor is just getting loads more aggro that don't solve the problems, right? Now, people number 2 deal with challenge by instantly getting stressed. Oh, here we go again. You know those people because they're instantly stressed. And then they'll get more and more and more and more and more stressed. And then until they're in enough pain, which depends on their relationship with pain, when they're in enough pain, now they're going to do something about it. These people know what the problem is. They're living, eating, sleeping, breathing it. What they're not able to do is to be able to get creative to create a solution, to rescue themselves from it. And very often they can be in an organization overlooked and mistrusted because of their emotional state. And bear in mind, emotional isn't always obvious. Emotion sometimes is silent and withdrawn too. So the type 1 people tend to stress out type 2 people more, and type 2 people don't trust type 1 people because they haven't got a clue what the problem is. And here I come with more paperwork and red tape, right? But the most effective way to deal with challenge is a third option. And that third option is about creating options. So if you can train yourself to instantly meet a challenge and go, this is a challenge. I mean, it might be a bit, oh, this is a challenge. And then create options. Now, with my clients, they create 20 options. They're ideas, right? This is what we're talking about. It's a creative exercise, ideas. The problem is when we're stressed, we're not creative. So sometimes we need to take a step back, do the breathing exercise, do the eye exercise, take a walk in nature, whatever it takes to just change your state, and then go back and creatively look at your challenge and start to create options. Now, some of you are thinking, I do create options, Becki. But I bet when we look at it, you only create 2 or 3. And neither actually feel right or are suitable. So you just try and pick one, stay or go, buy or sell, you know? When actually there are many more options. And then we feel trapped by the 2 options that aren't right. And then we don't know what to do. So we get more stressed. So think now, are you option 1? Do I disassociate and go into the fix-it mode all the time? Am I a big fixer? Mm-hmm. Yes. Do I just get really stressed and more stressed and more stressed? Or do I start to create options? Now, very naturally, not many people automatically create options. So what I would invite you to do is adopt that as a strategy. So I have dedicated books, which are 20 ideas to help me achieve XYZ, or 20 ideas to help me overcome. Even when I got diagnosed with cancer, which thankfully I'm fine from now after a bit of back and forward, 20 ideas to help me get through this. And they're ideas. They're not things. This is not a things to do list. There is no need for your quality control manager to look through the quality of these ideas. Just brainstorm and keep going until you find the one that the idea that will take on board the problem and open up perhaps a new avenue that will take you towards the right solution. So create options is the most valuable way. So you need to create the right states and then create the right options. And this is really starting to get into the effective ways to be resilient. So what are your top 3 current challenges? So I want you to think now, what are your top 3 current challenges? And they could be work related, health related, finance related, anything. What are your top 3 current challenges in life? So I want you to write down at least one current challenge, please. So just put it in a nutshell statement. You don't have to write about it. So just take a moment now. What are your top challenges? Right, so you should have at least one challenge now. And look, it's always better to write these down and get them out of the head. But if your only option is to do it in your mind, that's great. But I would really recommend writing it down. That gets it out of your head and body. So now I'd like you to come up with 6 ideas to overcome that specific challenge. What are 6 ideas to overcome the challenge? So have a little brainstorm now. Maybe you're chewing your pen, maybe you're just tapping your fingers, but I want you to be thinking, what are 6 ideas to help me overcome the challenge? And these are not things to do, remember, these are ideas. If dancing a chicken soup comes to mind, of course you're going to think that's a crazy idea. Write it down anyway. Now, if you've just met a blank spot, like your mind has literally gone blank, what that means is your mind's panicked because it didn't have an answer. Again, a hangover from school. If we don't have the answer, there's something wrong with us. So what I want you to do in that instance is I want you to go, God, that's interesting, I've gone blank. And then I want you to challenge your mind and push it through that blank spot. Because what you've done is you've just reached the end of what you knew. And then by pushing the mind further, you're pushing it off its lazy chair into discovering what it didn't know it knew. So start just to scribble those ideas. And obviously, if you've worked on one challenge and you've done it already, move on to the next challenge. We're just going to take a moment just to give you some scribble time. Luckily, I can't sing. I'd make up some background music at this time. So who's coming up with some good ideas? Just keep scribbling them. And again, like, resist the urge. Sometimes when we don't have an answer, we don't hold the space and let ourselves explore it. We'll suddenly think, oh, I'll take this chance to go for a cup of tea or grab a glass of water. And of course, taking care of our needs is really important. But if you're using that for avoidance of looking within, that's a problem. You're missing on connecting with your resilience and your resources, which then when you meet challenges in life, it's going to mean that you're limited, right? So you should have some good ideas writing down now. Great. So, and I would, in terms of the webinar here today, this should be, we're doing this in a workshop. This would be a much bigger item where we start to brainstorm different ideas and look at sharing ideas. That's the other thing, is to be able to receive another person's idea without smashing them down straight away. Because sometimes we can explore, we can do that without realizing it. So again, just to remind you, remember, anyone who's at any point doubting their own resilience, you've got to remember you were born of resilience. So to remind you of this and reconnect you with this, what I'd like you to do now is think of a challenge that you have overcome in the past. And again, that can be in any capacity in your life. What we do in one area of our life isn't a whole lot different than what we do in every area of our life. We might moderate ourselves a little bit, but it's the same mechanics. So what's a challenge that you have overcome in the past? Think about that now and ideally write it down. And I'd like you to write some notes about how you overcame that challenge. What resources did you pull on to overcome that challenge? That's right. How did you overcome the challenge? What was required of you in order to overcome that challenge? And again, if this is a time when you start getting distracted, just know, well, that's interesting. It's uncomfortable to look at myself. And be careful not to put some judgment into that as well. Because we're in the habit of listening for distraction rather than looking at ourselves. And our phones are training our nervous systems to do just that. Oh, here's a space. I don't know what to do with it. I know, I'll start doing something. And then we wonder why we're stressed and fatigued. Okay, so just keep thinking about the challenge that you've overcome. Because really, the power is in reminding yourself that you have already overcome so many challenges in your life. Even being born, you overcome the first hurdle, which is that 1 in 400 billion chance of being born. But where the magic happens is starting to be able to look at the challenges from the viewpoint of what did I learn from that? And it doesn't matter what the challenge is, however heartbreaking it is, however difficult it is. And it's okay if you can't get that straight away. Again, be careful not to judge yourself. But it's, if you start to look at what you need to learn, not what you need to learn, but what you did learn from that situation. And so now just start to calibrate some of the learnings. So if your situation, you know, one of the learnings could be, I learned to always check the small print on contracts. It could be, I learned to stick up for myself. It could be, I learned to speak out. I learned to ask what I needed. It could be, I learned to leave a job that wasn't right. I learned to put myself first. It could be, I learned to onboard staff better. It could be, I learned to take care of myself. But what were the learnings that you got from that situation? And again, in your own time, you can't, every second you invest in looking at what you've learned from situations and reflecting on those, it's the best investment that you can make. Especially if you're an overthinker, take the same energy that's just going round and round and put it into what did I learn from that? Not what do I need, but what did I learn from? And it'll redirect your energy into a much more healthy pathway. So again, I mean, you know, here are just some common fears that affect every single one of us humans. We're all impacted by these. And they're normally at the core of what the situations trigger these for all of us. And again, I mean, this is something I work inherently with many of my clients to change the way they respond to these inner programs that they have. And again, if you're interested in exploring if any of these relate to you, which is all humans, they do, then, you know, please reach out and explore how I may be able to help you. And what life might be like if you didn't have fear of failure, for example. Having a little slide malfunction there for a moment. We're just coming to the last, bear with me, we're just coming to the last slide anyway. There we go, almost. So the sort of almost penultimate reminder is really, again, a big core of resilience is to focus on what you want, not what you don't want. Move towards what you do want. Look at your language and communication being about what you do want. And if you don't know what you want, spend some time thinking about what you want and about what's important to you. Get clear about what's important to you. And again, a professional like myself or another can also help you to do that. Sometimes it can be quite challenging to take that look at yourself or create the space to do that. And finally, what is it that you'll take back to your work and your life from today's seminar and your investment of time? What is it that you'll take back specifically to your work and your life. So either write some notes down or have a think about that now. And yeah, I want to thank everybody for joining me today, and those on record who'll be listening to that in the future too. And I'd be delighted to, if there are any questions or reflections or insights, either we've got a few minutes for a Q&A, or you'll feel free to contact me privately with any questions at beckihoulston.co.uk or beckihoulston.com.
Brilliant. Thank you, Becki. Round of applause, I'm sure, from others as well that have been listening. As ever, at the moment, currently there aren't any questions. If you want to pose a question, put it in the chat, put it in the Q&A. I'll just summarise while people get a moment to think about that. Becki, as ever, just a really informative, knowledgeable, your expertise shines through. Every time I hear you speak on that subject of resilience, there's so much that resonates with me right from the start on the early slides, and things you were saying around, focus on fulfillment, not on success and failure, which in the modern world is quite a hard thing to do. But there is a complete distinction, isn't there, between fulfillment and that kind of thinking about success and failure, denial and disassociation. Possibly one of my favourites to do. That's not resilience. That resonated with me again this morning. And that distinction between stress and pressure, and that we can all live with pressure if we're using the pedals right. But stress is the thing to avoid, but making sure that we can distinguish between the two. And again, something that always hits home to me is those effective and ineffective behaviours. And even that simple scoring exercise, which I did sat here. I did write my name as well during that course and that exercise.
That's not bad, Warren, not bad.
I'm getting better at it. But the scoring piece, was always one. And what's interesting for me there, Becki, is how at times, when you're scoring that, and I've done that exercise with you on a couple of occasions, is that at times some of those behaviours, they do ebb and flow, don't they? It's not a constant, and it's that ebb and flow, and sometimes just checking in on, am I dealing with the effective or just the ineffective behaviours, and where you are with that. And always creating options is just the technique, isn't it? So Becki, thank you very much for today. There are no questions, which is unique, I think, but I think everybody would have taken something away from that. And I suppose for those of you that have been listening to that great presentation from Becki, I hope you've at least taken away one thing. As I say, I've taken away many, but I hope you've taken at least one thing that you can commit to taking into your day-to-day lives. And if you do that, then the last hour and a half will be valuable for you, I know. So if you've enjoyed...
Sorry, Warren, at the very least, no one's ever going to look at the dog's eyebrows in quite the same way again.
Definitely. I do like cats, though. So if you've enjoyed the webinar and want to know more about Evolve, then please do go to evolvemembers.com. Importantly, though, you can find out more there about details about our forthcoming events that are happening next week as part of the Basingstoke Deane Festival. You can get registered to get details of the great additional events that are coming as part of the extended festival in the autumn, and also to ensure that there is some legacy from the festival. You can go there to register interest about our leaders community, and what we're going to look to do is launch in September a Basingstoke Deane leaders community. So please do go to evolvemembers.com where you can learn all about that. But just to round up, and just some quick reminders and thanks as well. Firstly, just if you haven't already, do go and listen to the Evolve to Succeed podcast. Becki has been a guest twice on the podcast, so you can go and find Becki's episodes if you want to learn about more about Becki and what she talks about on there, particularly around stress and all of those kind of things. So thank you for being a guest on the podcast, Becki, and please do go find those episodes. But to wrap up, really finally, the thanks. Firstly, the thanks to Basingstoke Deane Borough Council for fully funding the festival and thereby supporting us and making sure all of the events to attend are free. So, please do remember that economic development team from Basingstoke and Deane Borough Council are thoroughly, supporting the festival, and they want to hear from you, the businesses, the business leaders, the organisations in Basingstoke and Deane, and want to connect with you. So please do connect with them. Their details are on screen now. To Enterprise South for your collaboration, we're jointly engaged with Basingstoke and Deane to deliver the festival. So thank you for your collaboration across the entire festival. And to you, Becki, thanks once again for, as ever, a really informative presentation. But finally, it is a sunny day, as Becki referred to out there. It is lovely warm weather. So thank you to those that have joined us today to be part of this event and to participate. Please, hope you enjoy the sunshine for the rest of the day and over the weekend. It's really appreciated. So thank you, everybody, for attending today.